Hello music lovers, vinyl collectors. Uncle Roddus back with a video, something a bit different tonight. I've been watching a bunch of videos from Noble Records. A few people of you might be familiar with that fella over in the US who's got a record shop, and he shows videos of him buying up big collections and really amazing stuff. Lots of really cool records and really impressive. And he shows what he keeps and what he sells and blah blah blah. But anyway, a few of you might be noticing that. And he was interviewing a guy who had a pretty vast collection, a fairly well-known collector, I believe. Anyway, and he was talking about his music and how he got into it and all that sort of thing. And I've been thinking about that. And I've been thinking about making a video because I got this brand new phone which is much more high definition and fancy than my old phone and stuff like that. So I'm going to make a video for you. And so I'm going to talk about my history with music, and how I got onto what I listened to and some of the things from my very early days. And I'm going to show some records. Piles all mixed up. I pulled a few records out from way back. So I don't know why I love music so much. I'm not musical. I'm not a musician. I can't play. I don't understand musical theory. I'm just not up with that sort of stuff at all. Really didn't follow it when I tried to learn a bit in school. And I've tried to play music on a couple of occasions and never had the patience to do it. And I would have loved to have played, but I never could. And I could never commit myself to learning properly. Anyway, beside the point, I do love music, and yeah, I don't know why, but I mean, Dad liked music a bit, but he didn't have a lot of it. He wasn't a big collector like I am. So my earliest memory of playing records was way back when I was probably about 6 years old. We were pretty poor, but we had one of those old gramophone type things, or whatever it was, and used to stack the 45s, and Dad had a bunch of 45s from his younger days, I guess, from when he was a teenager, and they were all 60s stuff, of course. And I remember some pretty cool pop hits that I listened to back in the day. I can't remember the names of the songs. No doubt there would have probably been a Beatles song or two amongst that, no doubt. And then when I was around about 10 years old, we were living on the West Coast. My parents were split up, and I was living with my mother on the West Coast with her new partner. And I don't know where it came from, but there was a record there. And again, we had one of those old gramophones, console things. There was a record there, and I don't know where it came from or whose it was, but I got quite into it, and I played it quite a lot. And I remember wanting to be a record DJ back then, and that was something that was quite interesting to me, and I thought, that'd be quite cool. Not that it never happened either. But the record in question, and I picked up a copy of it just a few years ago, is this one here, the Suzi Quatro Story Golden Hits. And yeah, I played this to death when I was a kid and over there on the West Coast. It was the only record that they had that I was into, that I remember. It was the only one I remember playing, and really enjoying it. I mean, Can the Can and Glycerine Queen and 48 Crash, Daytona Demon. I mean, these are all from 74. So this is only, I was listening to this only a few years later, like 76, 73, 74, even up to 75. So the album was pretty new out at the time. And yeah, I was really getting into it. This is the first album I really loved. And it was way before I started actually getting into music. Like in a big way, but yeah, it really was cool, and I really enjoyed that. I many years later I learned that Suzi was in a garage band and had a track that they did on one of those garage compilations from the 60s. It was a fantastic song that she did. I can't remember the name of it now, but I really enjoyed that. So yeah, I really love this record. I picked this up for $10 at a second-hand shop just not more than 4 or 5 years ago, or 5, 6 years ago. Pretty cool. So there's a few things I wanted to talk about how I got exposure to music, exposed to new music when I started listening. It's so completely different now how people get exposure to music than what we had. So there was no internet, of course, way back. This is so 1980. We're talking here, and I was just my first year in high school. In the end of 1979, my nana gave me a little Sony transistor radio, like the size of a cigarette packet sort of thing, one of those jobbies. And I don't know, she must have cottoned on that I was starting to like music. I don't know why she gave me that, but it was pretty cool. I mean, she spoilt me. Unfortunately, she died later that year. She died quite young, not much older than I am now, only a few years. So that was really cool. And also, that year that she died, she had my grandparents had this old square 50s radio, tube radio, just about that big, not big one. And it used to sit up in their kitchen. And I loved the thing. I don't know why I was so attracted to it. And when she passed away, it came to me. And that used to sit up in the kitchen, and I used to play it while I was cleaning up the dishes. So back then it was like there was a radio station called 3ZM, and they were the kind of the hip station at the time, and so they were playing stuff, and that was my first exposure. That and the little transistor radio, which I'll get back to soon. My first exposure to starting to listen to music and starting to seriously enjoy it. And that year, I remember from that radio, there were things coming up that were being played. Now, there wasn't a lot of New Zealand music being played on that, and there's still commercially, and it still isn't nowadays, to be honest. But one of the big records of that year, and that I really got into, a couple of songs they had on the radio, was this album called by My Sex, and called Space Race, and it's their second LP, I believe. They did have an album called Graffiti Crime. Was that after this? I don't recall. Anyway, at the end of, I'm guessing at the end of 1980, my mother brought me this and another record for Christmas, and those were my two first records. Like the Susie Quattro wasn't one of mine. I don't know whose it was, but this was my first LP, and the next one I'm going to show you. And because they were all over the radio, and I mean it was a commercial radio station, but it was pretty hip, and they were playing lots of cool stuff. And another album that I've got down here, I'll show you that I got onto, that was put onto me by that at that stage. So this was really big in New Zealand and pretty big in Australia. Not so much overseas, perhaps. I know a few people in the States have talked about it. But yeah, this is a fantastic album, and it still stands up so well for me, even like 45 years later. I mean, and I could just about sing every lyric to it. So that got thrashed. The other thing that had a major impact on me, on my record collecting at the time, was again in 1979. My parents were split up, and I was living with my mother, and we'd moved into a new house in 1977, in the area of Linwood in Christchurch, and that was where we stayed for the rest of my schooling years, right through high school. And she bought a Thorn console record player. So it was a record player with the electronics amplifier built underneath the turntable, and then a cabinet underneath for putting records in, and then it had separate speakers. And it was a really grunty piece of machinery. I really enjoyed using it, and it was pretty loud. I annoyed the fuck out of my neighbours with it for quite a few years. That also was, so that allowed me to buy these records and actually have something to play them on. So the other record that she got me for Christmas that year, in 1980, was this one, Split Ends. This is a massive record in New Zealand as well. It came out, so this is the one that really put Split Ends on the international scene. I mean, they'd been around for a few years. This is about their fourth album at this stage, and I wasn't that familiar with them. Again, I'm only 13 years old and just starting to really get into music. And I Got You was a massive hit, and it was played all over that radio station. And so, yeah, my mother bought those for me at the end of that year. So they were the two very first records that I had in my collection. They are not the original ones I had. I have repurchased those because as maybe some of you might remember, I've mentioned a few times, I sold my entire record collection back in 1998. I got sick of lugging it around, but by that stage I had probably 1,500 records, which actually I think I'm well surpassed that nowadays. Anyway, another one that was pretty massive on that radio station that I used to listen to after school and after dinner was this one. So the Whippet was made to commercial radio and was played quite a lot. And these guys, so this was the first LP I actually bought with my own money. And yeah, a great LP, and I still absolutely love it. They actually played here in Christchurch around the time of this LP. Unfortunately, again, we weren't wealthy. I don't quite remember how I got the money together to pay for these records at the time. Although I did have an after-school job a little bit later. That I guess pocket money and stuff. Yeah, so again, this is not the original copy that I bought back in the day, but it is an original New Zealand pressing, I believe, from back then. So pretty common record around here, owned by someone called Kate, but still a fantastic record, and still love it. And it sounds awesome. It sounds awesome. And actually, just while I'm on that, a few years later, when I was around about 15, a mate of mine sold me his copy of this that he had. My best mate. I'm not sure why he sold it to me, but I really liked it and really liked it. I obviously liked it a lot better than he did, and it absolutely got thrashed to the point where I think I wore the record out. Again, this is not the original. This is a replacement copy that I brought. It used to belong to someone called Wayne, who put his name on the back here in 1979. So this is an original New Zealand pressing as well. In very good condition, plays fantastically. This is my second favourite album of all time, as I have mentioned on many occasions. The friend of mine that sold me that, we were both getting into music, and we both discovered that there was a radio station, or the 3ZM station was affiliated with the ZM network, which was right across New Zealand. And in Auckland they were called 1ZM, in Wellington they were 2ZM, in Christchurch they were 3ZM, in Dunedin I guess they were 4ZM. After dark, I'm not sure of the timing exactly, but maybe after like about 10 o'clock, they used to switch over to the Auckland feed. They shut the stations down in Christchurch and they change over to the Auckland feed. And they used to have a guy who did an all-nighter show, and his name was Dr. Rock. And Dr. Rock had been on the television hosting a music video show, which I'll get to soon. His name was Stuart Jenkins? No. Oh, Christ, what was his name? Jenkins? Barry Jenkins. Barry Jenkins. Yes, that's right. Barry Jenkins. And he was this radio DJ, and he got onto the punk scene from the UK, and it wasn't something that was going to get played on commercial radio, but he had pretty much a free reign of things in those shows. And so that little transistor radio that my nana gave me, that used to sit on my pillow right next to my bed. In my bed, and when I was drifting off to sleep, I'd be listening to that. I'd have to have it really low so I didn't disturb the rest of the house. And I would drift off to sleep to the sounds of Dr. Rock, Barry Jenkins playing the most otherworldly fucking music that I just had no idea about, and it was amazing. And me and my friend Anthony, who sold me that Devo record, we would both listen to that show, and we would talk about some of the stuff we'd heard and some of the tracks that we liked. And I used to record the odd one as well later on when I had a tape recorder, which I managed to pick up a couple of years later. But things like he was playing on that show were things like Wires 12XU. When I heard that late one night, and these had a profound effect on me. They were just unbelievable songs, and they were just incredible. So yeah, 12XU, which is the closing track on Wire's Pink Flag. This is a reissue from 2018. So most of their first three albums all got reissued, and I did pick up copies of them. I don't know if I ever actually got around to buying a copy of this back in the day, but fantastic album, fantastic song. Other stuff that he played Absolutely, and you know that just so clear in my mind. Hearing those songs was things like "Once in a Lifetime" by Talking Heads. I'm pretty sure I heard that on a station one night. Last Night, Another Soldier, Angelic Upstarts. He played Systematic Death by Crass. Now I don't have that on vinyl, I have it on CD. That's off the Penis Envy LP, but that put me onto Crass. This is their a reissue of their, Christ, what one is this? Is this the Feeding of the 5,000? Have I folded this wrong? Oh yeah, the Feeding of the 5,000. Yeah, again, this is a reissue. I don't have an original of this, but I picked it up, yeah, a wee while back, from a shop in town. Absolutely love Crass. So yeah, Systematic Death. I mean, the Penis Envy LP is the best Crass LP. It is an outstandingly astonishing LP. One song, probably the first real punk song that I ever heard, he played one night, and it was Bad Brains, and it was a 7-inch single, Pay to Come. Now that's on this LP. This is a reissue of their first LP from what, late 70s? I don't know. Anyway, whenever. I actually never owned. I may have owned a copy of this for a while back. I had some EPs that I picked up of theirs back in the day, but Pay to Come, and it still blows me away. Actually, I've only just picked this one up a few years ago, and I say 2021. That song took me many years to actually find finally got it on a CD compilation. I could never find the single in New Zealand. It was an import only sort of thing, but that was an incredible song, absolutely incredible. And then the other band that he played that absolutely floored me and that absolutely had a huge influence on what I was started to listen to was The Fall. Now it wasn't so much. No, I'm pretty sure he probably played a Rebellious Jukebox, which is a fantastic song, the title track off this LP. This is the Superior Viaduct reissue from 2016. Back in the day, the two songs that stick out for me off his show that I remember the most was Fiery Jack and Bingo Master's Breakout. And then, of course, so I soon started tracking down their records once I had some money, and I had so much of the early Fall in my collection. The first LP I probably picked up was Grotesque and Hex Induction Air, and they were available here locally fairly easily because the Fall were pretty big in New Zealand. They toured here in 1982. Again, I missed that. And so that's another track, that band that just he put me onto. Now Barry Jenkins, of course this was being broadcast all over New Zealand, and so there were all these people my age and maybe a little older, maybe slightly younger, whatever, all tuning in, listening to this. There was actually a website, a Facebook page called Barry Jenkins Changed My Life, where they had about 5,000 members, and all these people who had remembered his show and what an impact he had. Probably an impact on the New Zealand music scene of what was being produced, which we'll get to in a minute. Another one that stuck out for me back in the day, that I heard late one night, and I don't know whether it was on Barry's show or whether it was on Radio U, because I probably in 1981, 81, I think, I discovered RDU, Radio U, the university radio station, and they were playing a lot of the similar sort of stuff that he was playing, but probably a lot more New Zealand stuff. But one night, again, on that little transistor radio, I heard that meow, meow, meow coming out of the thing, the introduction to Love Action. And so it was a little bit different from the punk stuff, but again, it was like it was coming from another planet. It was just, wow. And yeah, so and I did pick up on some of the new romantic stuff back in the day. I had Spandau Ballet, again, stuff that some of this was, but not so much played on the radio until later on. Some of it was getting played on the radio. Duran Duran, and I had some of that sort of stuff. So I got onto that fairly early. In that, but one that, so Barry had been hosting a show called Radio with Pictures, and that was in the late 70s. I didn't get to see that show. It was late on a Sunday night. By the time I got to high school, I was ready to start watching something like that, and I cottoned onto it, and so did a few of my mates. And again, by that stage, I managed to get hold of a top-loading cassette, those little square cassettes that you used to sit in front of the TV and record songs off it. And I remember hearing some really early punks. I mean, some punk stuff that One Night Stiff Little Fingers, they played a live track, Got to Get Away, off the Hanks LP, I think it was. Absolutely loved that. They played Sex Pistols. That's probably the first time I ever saw or heard the Sex Pistols. But they also played a bit of New Zealand music and a bit of Australian music. And one of the bands that they played on that show was this band from Australia. Now, this must have been like 1982. I think that says 1982. This must be 1982. So I was in the fourth form, second year at high school. And when this hit the video, I was like, wow. And I managed to get hold of a copy not long afterwards, again, some pocket money. This is their first LP and EP. The first two LPs are worth getting. This one and the second one. This is astonishing. And I'll tell you what, this is really quite hi-fi. It's an amazing recording. I've only just picked this up again a few years ago. It is an original New Zealand pressing or Australian pressing. I mean, it's still fairly common, not a super rare record. They went on to become hugely big around New Zealand and Australia, and I did see them live once, and it was the worst gig I ever went to. They were awful. I don't know why. I ended up going up to it was at the university. I ended up going up to the student union bar and getting pissed with a mate of mine that I'd run into from school, because this was about 1985, 86. So I'd been out of school a couple of years by that stage. So Radio with Pictures was where they played a bit of New Zealand music. Hadn't had a lot, apart from the Split Ends and My Sex, hadn't had a lot of exposure to New Zealand music. But one night they played a track off this EP. This is just a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tracks. There's 7 tracks on this. It's an EP. It's a 45 RPM. This is the Clean's second EP. Great sounds great, good sounds good, so-so sounds so-so, bad sounds bad, rotten sounds rotten. This is the EP they put it after the Boodle EP, which is also stunningly good. This is absolutely, I love this. I don't recall if I had Boodle back in the day, because this is the one I bought because of the Beatnik song, which is the one they played on RDU. And I think I recorded it. And that was a big hit with me and my mates at school. And it was actually a big hit later on when we started getting out and partying. We used to play that and sing along to it. And of course, the Clean are instrumental in Roger Shepherd's forming the Flying Nun record label, and this is on Flying Nun. They put out one more single after this, and then they split, which made me a little bit disillusioned with the New Zealand music, because what was happening was all these bands were putting out EPs, and then they would just split up, and they wouldn't put out anything else, and they would all disappear. So I wasn't a great New Zealand fan, but I did pick up on things like that, and also picked up on things like this fantastic LP. This is from 1984, I think. The Gordon's second LP. I would have probably heard this on Radio U, RDU, and particularly Quality Control, the opening track, I believe. And I picked it up probably soon after. It was fairly readily available around the scene, and of course, being a local band, Christchurch band. So they put out an LP, not on Flying Nun, but was distributed by Flying Nun, their first LP, self-titled. And that's a fantastic and rated as one of the all-time great New Zealand albums, and I have shown it before. This one came out after they split up and then reformed a few years later with a slightly different membership. Yeah, there was a guy called Vince Pinker who joined on bass, and the leader, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He was, slightly different. The band apparently didn't like this album. I love it, most of the Gordon fans all love the first album, and a few of them sort of put this album down a bit, but I think it's great, and this is what got me into the Gordons. And the Gordons, of course, are my all-time New Zealand favourite band, and that, of course, and, you know, that was a huge album for me back in the day. And then probably one of my earliest punk albums, so like I say, I heard Radio Pictures had a big influence on me as well back in the day, and I was going to say when I'm 14, 15 years old, and onwards. I mean, Radio Pictures went right into the late 80s after we'd left school and we were flatting, and we used to watch Radio Pictures on a Sunday evening at 9 o'clock, I think it was, or something, or 10 o'clock. And then after that, they would have the Sunday horrors. They would show a horror movie. One of the things that I did pick up back in the day, so I started getting into the hardcore punk stuff. And I was going to grab a couple more albums to show, which I haven't got, but never mind, because this video will get too long otherwise. This one here I picked up when I was about 15, and I remember putting this on Mum's Thorn, console, having all the windows open because it was summertime, and I was studying for end of year exams, and this would be blaring out the window at multiple volumes, really pissing the neighbour off. I absolutely love this LP. I mean, it's really cool. So yeah, again, this is a replacement copy, but it is an original New Zealand pressing. Back then, though, so around about 82, I started really getting into this punk stuff. That was the year I did my school cert and was studying for exams. Things like the Punk and Disorderly albums, they were released locally on an album on a label called Music World. Music World was like a completely different type of label. It was like grandma, granddad music. There were brass bands and choral religious music and indigenous music and really most of the stuff you would see is in the op shops and garage sales, stuff that most of us wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. But apparently the guy's son, it was a Christchurch label, his son was into the punk, and so he talked his old man into releasing some of these records. And he did. So I had the Punk and Disorderlies, and I had the Riotous Assembly, and then but before even those came out, we had the Cherry Red Records put out the Burning Ambitions double LP, which was huge for my group of people, and that and I've got a copy of it, and I was supposed to bring that in, and I didn't. So sorry, but those albums were massive for me. This is, again, early 80s. This is the dawn of my music obsession. Backtracking slightly to the radio again, that commercial radio station, two of the biggest hits around that time were by a man called David Bowie, and they were off this album, Ashes to Ashes, and Fashion. And Fashion absolutely blew me away. I love that song. And so I acquired this LP not that far past when that came out. And yeah, wow. Yeah, awesome record. And of course, that made me backtrack. I mean, I must have known a little bit about David Bowie back then, but this just floored me. I was this was right for me right at the time, and Pink Floyd, The Wall, I mean, came out that year when we used to go around singing, teacher, leave that kid alone, at high school and all that kind of crap. So, but that album was massive. And of course, I went back to Bowie, and there I've got all the Bowie box sets up there, and I love it. And his entire career was pretty amazing. But I didn't get into the Let's Dance album when it came out a couple of years later, and it really, partly because I was right into the punk thing, and also because it was so commercial, and it got absolutely hammered. The videos were all over the TV, all that sort of stuff, and it was all over the radio, and it just got hammered. So I thought, nah, fuck that. So yeah, that's kind of a rundown on the roots of my collecting and how it all sort of started. And like I say, those first albums that Mum brought, and then from there, and that console, and then hearing people like Barry Jenkins. Barry Jenkins, he did host Radio Pictures before I was watching it, but then he was replaced by a lady called Karen Hay. So she was the one that me and all my mates got to see hosting the show, and she was pretty cool actually, and she was quite attractive, and so all us 14, 15-year-olds all drooling over here every Sunday night. But, you know, also getting to listen to some really cool and music that we weren't going to get to hear anywhere else. A few years later, I started reading magazines. So Rip It Up was coming out back in the New Zealand, and that was available free from record shops. You could just grab it off the counter. So that was international as local, so you could get a bit of local information about bands through that. And then in 1984, I actually started reading the New Musical Express, and actually, yeah, no, I just buy it from a local New Jays Johnson. I didn't get it imported because it was about 3 months behind by the time it got here. But that had a big impact too on what I listened to, and that got me into the grunge stuff that came out later on in the early 90s. Again, I was still listening to RDU at that stage, and that was where I first heard Nirvana, but I'd already well knew all about them from reading about them in the magazine, in the press. So yeah, I mean, and there it is 45 years later, and I've still listened to all this music and plus lots more. I could go on and on for a long time about all the other types of music that came into my life back in the day, but yeah, we're already done 30 minutes, so I'll let you get back to your day. Thank you for watching. See you next time.